So display settings, and here we go. So module 4, and this is more the sort of process related. How do you write up a safe system assessment? Where do you put things? How do you deal with some of those specific issues? Absolutely critical that you've got your head around the principles and the energies and those sorts of things, which we've covered in the first 3 modules. And as I mentioned, at the end of this one, what we're going to be doing is giving you an assignment, which is to undertake a safe system assessment. Well, it's a pared back one. We don't want you to have to spend too much of your own time working away on it. So we paired it back to some essential elements to prove that you have the competencies to undertake safe system assessments. And we've got one around your house or your office or wherever whatever the address was that you gave to our admin team, and a site was found with a design of some upgrades, and you're going to assess how well that aligns with safe system principles. Okay, so at the end of this module, we want to point you at the guidelines that are available out there to assist you in undertaking safe system assessments. So you've got that as a backup. Show you how to complete the safe system assessment matrix. That is the meat of the safe system assessment. How to write up the report. What elements need to go into the report so we have consistency across Australia and New Zealand in terms of the reporting of safe system assessments. And we're going to spend a little bit of time trying to categorize treatments into primary or supporting. Now, this is one that people will probably struggle with at the start. And so I'm going to point you at some reading material, give you some examples. But I understand that it'll be a little bit challenging for some people to get their head around at the start. Don't forget to count your wallies. So we've done well. We've covered off the safe system. We've looked at the principles of the safe system. We've looked at the elements. These are all related in one way or another to a safe system assessment. So we're really utilizing the assessment framework to put these principles to be able to look at the project through a lens of these principles. And it really is a risk assessment methodology with some particular tweaks and lenses. And one of those tweaks, obviously, is that use of exposure in its own entity rather than mixing with likelihood. But we analyze the exposure to a crash type, the likelihood of that crash type, and the severity of that crash type. And we have a methodology for multiplying those out to a risk score for that crash type. And for those severities, remember, we are looking back to our injury severity curves like this, and the coloured spectrum chart that we gave you in module 1 with lots of different crashes and speeds and likely severities. So you're getting, you've got good information there for severity of crashes. Here's some more information for passenger vehicles at different angles and speeds. Side impact with poles, we talked a little bit about, but the 30 to 40 kilometre per hour side impact with a pole is sort of our point where things go really bad really quickly, and pedestrians and cyclists around the 20 to 30 kilometre per hour mark going very bad very quickly. So there is a bit of judgment required in this, but you've got a lot of sort of baseline information to calibrate your thinking on severity of crashes. And there's another table as well. So I popped those into the start of this module, and there's a lot of information in module 1 on this as well. So you're pretty well set to be able to jump into how to actually do this assessment. What's the actual process for that? So Max, before we jump into that, it's probably worth gauging where people are at in their experience with safe system assessments. So just a quick poll to see where the group's at, if you've got a poll there.
Yep, so I've just launched it. Hopefully everyone can see it jump up on their screen. The question is, what has been your involvement with safe system assessments? And the answer is on a scale, nothing. Safe system what now? I've heard the term, but don't know much more. I've had one done on one of my projects. I've done one where I live, breathe, and eat safe system assessments. So see if we've got any very excited safe system assessors already online with us, Cam.
Yes, that's it.
So I'll give you a moment or two to fill out the poll. And I might just share the results in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you for participating. There we are, Ken. I'll let you chat through the results.
Thanks, Max. So yeah, most of you heard the term, don't know much more, and that's fine. A few people have done them. That's exciting, and had them done on their project. So yeah, we've got a good mix there. I'm going to go through the very basics of it and then build from that. As I say, having a fundamental understanding of the crash tolerances, the what's influencing likelihood, the ability to separate exposure, likelihood, and severity are some pretty integral things to be able to do a safe system assessment, and that's why we've spent that time in those first few modules. So just cleared that one off there. So let's get into it. So this is the Austroad Safe System Assessment Framework, released late 2016. And it was really that document that Austroads had identified. There's a lot of people asking for safe system infrastructure, safe system treatments, and people were saying, well, what is that? Could we have some sort of way to assess that? Now, I was on the working group for this development of this document, and I'd been doing with a few colleagues things we called safe system audits before this. So they took some of our methodology, they took some other ideas, and we bounced around in the working group, and this was what was produced. Now, there's a number of things in this document probably that need an update, that need a version 2. We're finding that out after the hundreds, if not thousands, of safe system assessments that are now being done across Australia and New Zealand. But it's still, the fundamentals are in this document. And you can see there the coloured little boxes there. So the objectives of the project you're assessing, but also the level of assessment that is going to be undertaken. Because the Safe System Assessment Framework was intentionally developed as a very scalable methodology to use, as in you could do in-depth assessments, or you could do light assessments, and you can also assess a very small project, a little splitter island or something in a local area, or you could assess big projects like new motorways, or you could even the versatility is there that you can even assess remote sites, or you could technically do whole towns or cities under the assessment framework. So it's very versatile. It's being used in a particular way these days, which is okay, and people are getting quite happy with the consistency of that. But there is a decent amount of flexibility within the assessment framework. The green there is the project context. It's about us understanding the context of the project before diving in to do the assessment. And a lot of that is, well, some of that helps in our actual assessment and scoring, but a lot of it helps with making meaningful suggestions and recommendations to the project team in ways to improve their alignment with safe system principles. Then there's, in the red there, the safe system assessment matrix with exposure, likelihood, severity, and there's some other elements of the safe system that are thought about in a qualitative way. I'll take you through that shortly. And then there's those treatments that are being recommended or suggested. in blue, and then we sort of categorize those to show how beneficial they could be. So as I mentioned, that document came out late 2016, and then a couple of jurisdictions decided that supplementary guidance was appropriate. They wanted to add some of their own comments in there and clarify a few things from that document and show some specific jurisdictional guidance. So Victoria has done that, South Australia has done that, and Queensland's got some bits and pieces sort of going on in the background, not a sort of public-facing formal document, but the Safer Roads team in TMR there has some different spreadsheets, some templates, and a few other things. So if you're in Queensland and you're doing safe system assessment, it's worth talking to them, or actually you can just talk to Max or myself and get that information. But it's probably worth having a chat with them just to make sure you're on to the latest. Although we do that, we try and make sure we know what they're up to. So these documents have clarified a few things. As mentioned last module, we've created those fact sheets for a few extra things that haven't been covered in any of these documents, from the industry asking questions or us discovering things that aren't well clarified. What I'm going to do is start at one of the main outputs of a safe system assessment, what you'd be expecting to see if somebody did a safe system assessment for you, or something you're going to produce as a safe system assessor. And what it is something that might look something like this. And this shows us on the y-axis here safe system alignment score, and on the x-axis what we see are key different crash types: run-off road, head-on, intersection, other, pedestrian, cyclist, motorcyclist. Other could be anything that's not captured in the categories. Could be sideswipe, could be crashes with animals, could be level crossing crashes, things that you've identified at your particular site that you believe isn't captured in the other ones. So there's some flexibility there. But what we're doing is putting a score for each of these crash types. And the score is really a risk score. So higher is worse, higher is higher risk. So what you would like to see is zeros on all of these would be, a risk has been eliminated. But you can immediately start to see from the red, that is the existing conditions of whatever this site is. You'll always do the existing conditions. So that could be, the intersection as it is now, and they're planning to upgrade it to maybe a roundabout. And so you'll do the existing cross intersection with give way signs. You will score that through the whole methodology. Then you will look at the design for the roundabout and you will score the roundabout. And so you can see here they're comparing three options. And you can immediately start to see different bits of information in these three sort of hypothetical options. Roundabout looks to be performing pretty well in a lot of areas. Maybe cyclists not so good with this particular one. And we've got a modified T with signalization as an option there. We can see how it performs with the T. So you can immediately see, you can gather quite a bit of a story just from this this output. So let's now go through the process. How are we going to actually produce something like this with these scores? So the first thing you want to do is, as a safe system assessor, is to gather understanding of the context of that project. We need to understand a good bit about it to help us get to those scores, and then, as I talked about, help us make meaningful recommendations. Now, the Austro Safe System Assessment Framework provides these prompt questions straight out of the assessment framework. And so you can just relay those questions onto the client and ask them to either, write those back to you, or maybe have a workshop or a meeting to start with to ask these questions. But there are things in there like, what's the issue that's being addressed with this project? What's the reason for the project? What's the land use? Do you have traffic volumes? Do you have pedestrian volumes, cyclist volumes, motorcycle volumes? Have you made any commitments in terms of speed limits? Maybe got elderly or children present, or is this on the strategic cycling corridor? So lots of questions to gather a good feel for the project. So they assist you, and you gather that information, and you get the designs of any upgrades they're proposing, and off you go. And you'll probably then head out on site, have a look at the existing road with the designs, or maybe you're doing a bit of desktop thinking first as a team. Maybe you'll have a chat about it, but then you want to start filling out the safe system assessment matrix for the existing conditions. So this is the matrix. And what you can see, there are 3 rows: exposure, likelihood, and severity. So we're making sense why I was banging on about that so much throughout the course, because we're going to have to try to quantify exposure, likelihood, and severity for each crash type for the existing conditions, and then every design that is provided to us to assess. So you can see there, the columns are those ones that I mentioned before: runoff road, head-on, intersection. Now, those are for passenger vehicles. They're for passenger vehicles and heavy vehicles. Pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists there have their own columns each. Now, if a vehicle was to run off the road and hit a pedestrian, we would categorize that, so if we imagine that in our mind, we would categorize that and score it and account for it in the pedestrian category. Likewise, if a pedestrian is crossing the road at an intersection and struck by a vehicle, yes, the crash has happened at the intersection, but again, we would categorize it as a pedestrian crash. So the way I like to think about it, especially for those who have done black spot investigations or crash reduction studies or the like, where you've analyzed crashes, the way a crash is coded is very much how this should be thought about. So again, if a vehicle was to run off the road at an intersection and hit the signal pedestal, for example, we do categorize that as a run-off road, not an intersection crash. So just trying to clarify that one up straight away early, because it can be a little confusing in some situations. So what we're trying to do is populate each of the cells of this matrix with information and then a final score. And the score we're going to populate each one is between 0 and 4. And so what we are given from the Australian Safe System Assessment Framework is a scoring reference sheet. And we've reproduced that here. And you can see there, there's a score of 0, a 1, 2, 3, and a 4, with a bit of information of how you can arrive at these. So let's have a look at, we'll start with volume. So we see there's 0. There is no exposure to a certain crash type. There is no side flow or intersecting roads, no cyclists, no pedestrians, or no motorcyclists. One, the volumes of vehicles that might be involved in a particular crash type are particularly low, therefore exposure is low. For run-off road, head-on, and other crash types, the AADT is less than 1,000 vehicles a day. For cyclists, pedestrians, and motorcyclists, crash types are less than 10 units per day. We see 2 goes up to 1,000 to 5,000 for vehicles, 10 to 50 for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. 3, 5,000 to 10,000, or 50 to 100. And a 4 is greater than 10,000 and greater than 100 pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. So we've got some clear numbers there. That's interesting. That's helpful. We've got some numbers to directly look at. So we can look at our intersection or our length of road, and we can immediately say, okay, what is the exposure to run-off road? And you simply say, well, what is the AADT, or what is the predicted AADT, annual average daily traffic? And so they might say, well, the AADT is 1,500 vehicles a day is our AADT for passenger vehicles. And so you can look through that and go, okay, well, is that less than 1,000? No. Is it between 1,000 and 5? Okay. There we go. I'm going to take a 2. We take that and we pop a 2 in there. And because we're using the same AADT for head-on, we're going to pop a 2 in there. We've got an intersection, enough. Our 1,500 vehicle per day road that we're assessing happens to cross a road with 5,000 vehicles a day. So a more major road it's crossing. Okay. So what we do there is we add the AADT. So we take our 1,500 on the road we're assessing, which happens to be the minor road in this case, and we add it to the higher volume road, or the road that is being intersected with. So we take that and we get our 6,500 vehicles per day, and we go back here and we go, okay, for 1, higher than the 2, it's lower than the 4. There we go. It's going to sit in that 3 range. We go back and we go, okay, 3. Like an extra line there, but anyway. Now we're looking at our side again, and we're thinking, okay, other crash types. What are we noticing out there? And maybe you're thinking about sideswipe crashes. Maybe you're thinking about people emerging from driveways or the like. And we're going to go with a 2 because we're not seeing, anything that alters that from the percentage of passenger vehicles. Then we get to pedestrians. We, maybe call the client up and say, have you done any pedestrian counts? And they usually say no, unfortunately. We say, have we done any cyclist counts? Unfortunately, they usually say no. Motorcyclists, and they say, oh, yeah, we know a little bit about motorcyclists. Now, I'm hoping that over time we get much better and we have better pedestrian data, better cycling data. And I know there's initiatives happening around Australia and New Zealand to help us collect that information. But what ends up happening and a lot of the time in safe system assessments is you make a call based on what you've seen on the site, what you know about the area, what you've gathered from talking to people who know the area well, if you don't know it well, and you make a judgment call on what we're talking about for this. And you use the estimate on the units per day, but you're thinking about volumes of vehicles and pedestrians particularly low or moderate, high. So you may be sort of calibrating this a little bit, but hopefully you can make a reasonable judgment call. It's lovely if you get actual accounts of these vehicles, but yeah, as I say, unfortunately, my experience is it's not often that you're able to be given that. But maybe you decide that this is a very, you're out there and you're looking and you're watching, and you say, well, we haven't seen any pedestrians at all here. This is quite a rural area. You might say, I'm not prepared to say no pedestrians because I think people will walk here, and I've heard that there's occasional people who walk their dog and these sorts of things. So I'm not going to go with the putting in a 0, as in no pedestrians, but I'm going to say it's very low, very occasional. So I'm going to go with the 1. Or maybe, if you go, oh no, there's a lot of pedestrians, very popular area, pedestrians crossing the school there, and they're all, you'd be saying a 4 down the other extreme. Cyclists, yeah, you might be going, okay, well, I haven't seen any out here. This is not a known commuter route. This is not, maybe there's the lycra-clad cyclists that go through on the Sunday morning, but apart from that, we're really not seeing a lot. There's an occasional rider. Again, you might decide to go with a 1 on that basis. The lycra-clad brigade on the Sunday morning or Saturday morning training ride through there is an interesting one. I tend to not factor them heavily into the score I put, but I utilize the qualitative questions that are a bit later on to address that and make commentary around that. Now, that's one that sort of I've learned over time, that if you too heavily skew this score based off that, it gives because there are so many categories of cyclists, you end up sort of skewing the output, which looks quite odd for a specific dedicated time. But it's much better to address that as its own entity rather than the AADT style, which we're looking for here. Anyway, and then motorcyclists, well, you tend to go, if you don't have any other information, 1 to 2% of AADT as motorcyclists. But it may be a popular motorcycle route. That it's going to get much higher or the like. But let's put a 2 on that one, as in 10%. 1% there of the original. And it's sort of as easy as that for exposure, because these are just dealing with numbers. Now, there are lots of factors influencing those numbers, but in the safe system assessment, you just you can say, oh, I know the school's there. I know this is on the pedestrian desire line or the strategic cycling corridor, or I know people are, there's a really popular route to get to the freeway, or what, you will have intel, you'll get ideas, but in the end, we just want the numbers. And you would probably write in here what numbers, you got, or you might say, based on view on the site, estimated this as low. You slightly justify it, but it's a pretty clean, clear-cut one. You just get the number. Then we go to likelihood. Now you can see here, this is where we're starting to put some factors in that are going to influence the score. So you can see there for runoff road, we've got the speed, the geometry, the shoulders, barriers, hazard offsets, guidance and delineation, etc., and very much etc., because there's a raft of things: the surface, the lighting, the list goes on of things that you could put in there, and it'll depend what your site is and what you're seeing and what you believe influences this score. And so what you do with likelihood is go back to our wonderful scoring reference sheet and you have a look. You have a look at the definitions in there. Let's start with 1 this time. Let's start with a 1. It is highly unlikely that a given crash type will occur. That's not much information, is it? Let's see how a 2 would be. It is unlikely that a given crash type will occur. Again, this is not giving us a lot to play with, is it? A 3, it is likely that a given crash type will occur. Okay. A 4, this looks like it's got some more information. The likelihood of road user errors leading to crash is high given the infrastructure in place, e.g. high approach to speeds to a sharp curve, priority movement control, filtering, right turn across several opposing lanes, high speeds. Okay, we're getting a bit more of an idea in our mind. I mean, we've got some pretty serious infrastructure deficiencies there that are going to actively be making crashes more likely. Let's go all the way back down to a 0. There is only minimal chance that a given crash type will occur for an individual road user given the infrastructure in place. Only extreme driver behavior or substantial vehicle failure could lead to a crash. This may mean, for example, I want to actually cross this a little bit out because that was one thing, and I have taken this straight out of the Austroads guide. That was one that got clarified in the Victorian guidance, and we're certainly fact sheets will reflect it because that next one, that one would actually be dealt with in exposure. The thing here is that we need to acknowledge that very important principle of the safe system, which is people make mistakes. So you can't look at a bit of infrastructure or planned infrastructure and say, well, everything's good. So as long as everybody follows the rules all the time, we're good. Right? We have to recognize that people are running red lights, they're making mistakes, they're falling asleep, they're distracted by the phone or the kid in the back. You have to take a real world look at this likelihood, not a theoretical, if everybody follows the rules, look at it. Okay, so I don't think I've ever, I think I once put a 0 on a shared path section of a cycleway section of road, and it was fairly small, and I was like happy enough to go with likelihood at 0. But apart from that, like maybe I'd do a 1, maybe I'd occasionally pick to a 0.5, and that gives you a little hint into something. You can go to a 0.5 if you absolutely must, but you can't go any more precise than that. Right? So what you have to do here is use a lot of your judgment. And what I find is that people who've been doing road safety auditing for a long time are exceptional at this likelihood scoring. I mean, that is what road safety auditors are just like trained to do. Because you're looking for characteristics of the road environment that increase the likelihood of crash. The see-through effect, the dynamic visual obstruction, the masking, the sightline impediments, the one set of traffic signals and the one behind it, you get that see-through effect again, or those sorts of things, or the line markings faded, or the line markings confusing, or the wrong signs being used, or that you get it, gathering all these things in your mind, and you're making a judgment on how likely it might be for a crash. Now, we've done a fact sheet on this particular one. How do you make that call? Because if you look at any intersection and you take these words at face value, everything would score a 1 or a 0. Highly unlikely. Okay? Because crashes are, they're frequent. They're infrequent in the scheme of things. They're unlikely in the scheme of things. It's just that some areas are more likely than others. And so what we are actually doing in this likelihood one is doing a relative likelihood to the area, to the state, to like sort of intersection. So have a read of the fact sheet to help you calibrate this, but you're going to end up making a judgment call, and you're going to be utilizing all of these different features of the road, the speeds, the geometry, the shoulders, the barriers, the guidance, the lighting, the sealed shoulders, the surface condition, the line marking, the sight lines, the geometric layout. You know, you're going to be thinking about all sorts of stuff. And what we need you to do in a safe system assessment is not just, you know, think about it, have a look around. Yep, I'm going to go with a 2. We actually need you to document and justify how you arrived at a 2. So it can be a little annoying because you're dot pointing a whole lot of things, but we need that justification. How have we arrived at that 2? So let's take the runoff road, and say we've gone. Okay, we're on a 80 km/h road here. It's got very good line marking. It's got sealed shoulders. It's got some audio tactile edge line. It's got some lighting. Yes, there's a run of trees down the side, but they're offset by about 8 meters or so. So I'm, you know, factoring all of these things in, and you know, you might decide, okay, well, I think that, you know, it's unlikely that a given crash type will occur. Some people often want to say, well, we could use the crash history. That would give us an indication of the likelihood of crashes. And the answer to that is no, you can't use the crash history, because the crash history is that and that and that. So your end scores, you should be able to look and hope that crash history might sort of align with it. But the other thing is that crash history, you know, just because a road hasn't had any crashes yet doesn't mean that it's a low risk road. It just hasn't presented itself in crashes yet. And especially on lower volume roads, it doesn't, you know, certainly doesn't mean it aligns well with safe system principles just because there's been no crashes. Anyway, so you go through this and you actually dot point things that increase, that make you want to put the score up. Maybe the high speed, you know, the maybe the slight geometric efficiencies. You dot point a few of those, and then you dot point the things that make you want to make the score lower. And you put those, the sealed shoulders, a good surface, and the like. And you justify that, and you might come out and you ended up deciding maybe to go at 2. So then you go through and you do this for all of them. Maybe you'll go a 2 for head on. Maybe you'll go intersection. You've analysed it. It's, you know, high speed. Maybe you'll go a 3 for that intersection. But remember, you're dot pointing all your ideas down as to how you landed on that. It's not just, oh, I'm going to go 3, 4 on that. So I'm doing this now just to show you some scoring. I'll show you some real world examples of it, of safe system assessments and how it's gone through. And so you go and you do that, and I don't know, 1, 4, 4. Now remember, you see, like I've put a 4 there for pedestrians, and you might say, well, there's no pedestrians there. Like you just said, there were hardly any pedestrians there. But we've accounted for that there, right? So now we're saying there is a pedestrian there. What's the chance? What's the chance they will be hit in the sense of what is the infrastructure doing to help them? So are there crossing facilities? Is there separation? Are there areas? And for this one, I'm saying there's not. And you know, because there's no pedestrians there, nobody's built pedestrian facilities. But this should play out as a result of the scoring anyway. So we'll put a 4 there, and we'll put a 3 for motorcyclists. So, there you've gone through that. A lot of justification, a lot of work to get to that, a lot of looking through the lens of a road safety auditor and type thinking, and you get to your scores. Now, Max, I'll pause there and see if any questions I need to deal with, or you're probably dealing with things behind the scenes.
Yes, few coming in behind the scenes, but I think we're all good. Ken, you can carry on.
Thank you. And so I think you're getting an understanding here of the process in terms of getting scores to these cells in the matrix. And I don't need to spend a huge amount of time on severity, because it's a similar thing, but you've got some different information here. You've got, let's go up to one that's a little cleaner here, 2. So what would a 2 be for severity? Should a crash occur, it is unlikely that it will result in fatality or serious injury to any road user involved. Kinetic energies are moderate, and the majority of time are effectively dissipated before reaching the road user. So that would be directed along it, or there's just low energy from the speed. Like a barrier system's there, or it's a cushioning device, or the speeds are low for pedestrian crashes or motorcycle crashes. So you go all the way up to a 4. Should the crash occur, it is highly likely that it will result in a fatality or serious injury to any road user involved. Kinetic energies are high enough to cause fatal serious injuries. It is unlikely that the forces will be dissipated before reaching the road user. So you can see there, you've got your scoring, and this is where we start to go back to these sorts of scoring guides, the data, and you can start to somewhat calibrate and think about things using this and the other information you've got. So you can see there we've got 4, the 3, the 2, 1, and the 0. So you're getting an idea of that. General indication only. Use some judgment yourself as well. So we go back to this, and we've got this 80 km/h road. We've got some trees in the roadside. So when the crash happens, so somebody's run off the road. Now they're into those trees. It's going to be bad. I'm putting it up at a 4, because if I go back all the way to here and I look, I'm in the 4 range there. We know that people hitting trees and poles, passenger vehicles, are not doing well when they do the collision speeds around the 80. Now, if they were able to wash off some speed and bring things down before they hit the pole, we might be able to go down into some lower severity. Oh, there we go. Head on. Let's go to head on. So head-on crashes, car versus car. Now we're up here. We've got a bit of red still in there, and it could be in the 3, it could be in the 4. It's somewhere still in the high range. But maybe I'm willing to give this one a 3, maybe, or maybe I decide no, I'm not willing to give it a 3. You might be looking at 85th percentile speeds, and you might be looking at things like, well, what's the percentage of heavy vehicles? Because that's certainly going to increase it. So a 3 or a 4 or the like. So let's go with maybe a 3 on that. The head-on crash is the one we can probably survive the most. So a 3 is still a very high score. We're saying it's likely to cause death or serious injury. We're not saying everything's good, but we're saying maybe it's not a sort of guaranteed death or serious injury. There's some that might, for one reason or another, bringing that down a bit. But again, you're going to be justifying this, how you landed at. Okay, percentage of heavy vehicles was factored into that. 85th percentile speed was factored into that. Maybe it's a bit windy, so people are down on the speeds usually. So if they do head on, same with these ones, justifying how you got there. Using these as some thinking prompts, but always remembering there could be other factors. The intersection, Well, we're now talking intersections and we're looking at the angles of impact. So what are the angles? What are the speeds, percentage of heavy vehicles, all those factors we're talking about for severity of crashes, and maybe we end up with a 4 on that. Although we're talking side swipes, weren't we? That was the one we were talking about. And we know side swipes, they don't get categorized really too well in any literature, but we know just from the vectors, the physics of it, the mechanics of it, it's going to be a lower severity than that right angle crash. Maybe in there, maybe we put it down as a 3 or even maybe a 2 if you've got some delta V, some change in speeds are down, but we'll put a 3 there. Now, pedestrians, remember, they're crossing now the road. They're being struck. This is an 80 km/h road. If we go to our charts there, we're seeing pedestrians are really sitting in sort of these areas here. So this is so far beyond for pedestrians what we could, pedestrians will be handling when struck. So we're definitely going to be going a 4 there and a 4 there, and a motorcyclists. Yeah, well, probably going to go a 4 because we're covering off a whole lot of crash types. Could be the intersection crash, could be the run-off road crash, could be the side swipe crash, but you'd be thinking of the more severe ones of that. Okay. So then what you do is say, I've now populated this with lots of justification and lots of numbers. I'm now going to multiply. And I multiply down. And I multiply the exposure times the likelihood times the severity. And I get a total score out of 48, isn't it? No, yeah, 64. I'm getting confused. For each of the crash types. So we've got 2 times 2 is 4, is 16. And then we do next one, and we go 2 times 2 is 4, 12. And you do this all the way through. And then you add them. And you get a score, a final score out of 448. 64 for the other one, isn't it? From like 448. Score out of 448 for your total alignment with safe system principles. So a score of 448 out of 448 would be the worst alignment with safe system principles. A score of 0 would be perfect alignment with safe system principles. You will find that it sits somewhere in between. So that is the safe system assessment matrix, and that is what you're going to be spending a lot of time doing. So Max, I'll take any questions on that, and I've sort of done it through at a theoretical level, but I think the next thing will be to show an example and maybe even jump into a real world one that was done to show a bit of that, and then we can talk about some other stuff. But I'll pause, we'll take any questions, then we might take our little break.
We did have a good question just regarding existing conditions in a greenfield project. And from memory, we talk in more detail next webinar. Ken, am I right?
We do. And we've got good time allocated next webinar to talk about anything else that anybody comes up with. But essentially a greenfields site, you have the option to plot the route from A to B for the existing road and then assess that. So take a town bypass, for example. Well, you would do the main route through the township as your existing conditions, and then you do the bypass as the design. That makes sense? Because then you're showing, the improvement in safety that will be given by the creation of that bypass. But yeah, so that's sort of it. It can be it can get very complex in some sort of major urban projects where it's a web of vehicles coming in and the like. But essentially that's the theory behind it, is take the A to B and how the majority of people are utilizing that, and then your greenfield site has the design.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for me to deal with?
I can pose you another scenario, which is probably a good one to clarify in terms of exposure, which if you're looking at an urban motorway, and we know pedestrians are not allowed to walk on an urban motorway, would you be as bold as to say the exposure for pedestrians is 0 then, because they're not permitted to walk in that space at all?
No, I don't. I mean, we've done assessments of urban motorways, and I don't put 0 for pedestrians, because we know that pedestrians are on the motorway. It's usually due to broken down vehicles or taxis pulling up in the middle of the night and people getting out to, God knows what they're doing, vomiting or going to the toilet or whatever it is, but they're wandering on the motorway, and so they're pedestrians, and so we're accounting for that from real world, and you get that information because when you're doing this, you ask them, what's going on out there? Do you have footage of it? That one, to a degree, I know from crash history, but it's not the crash history driving that particular one. I just know that occurs. I have done 0 for cyclists though on motorways in past safe system assessments. Now people will say, oh no, but the Dutch tourist that arrives at the airport and unpacks their bike and then rides it down CityLink and through the tunnel, or the Uber Eats driver who GPS tells them to go down there. And again, so that one to me is so much rarer and odder that I categorize that, account for that a little bit in the other questions, these qualitative questions, which we haven't got to yet. But I would be, it's probably an area I have put that 0 for exposure, is the bikes on motorways.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ken.
All right, let's take a few minutes. What do we reckon here, Max? Let's take 4 minutes. Fill up your water, coffee, and we'll jump into a little bit more of the explaining of the safe system assessment. Thanks. All right, Max. Well, I see some good questions and answers in the chat there. So that's good. So keep those questions coming in. Max is behind the scenes answering. I saw a bit of discussion about sort of worrying about over engineering and over investing in stuff. I think you'll find that the assessment methodology is actually quite good in helping to allocate, minimal funds or to address some of those concerns, because the scores can pop out, even if exposure exists, in a high realms, the likelihood could be quite low, and then the multiplication effect there can come out to low scores. But it also then forces us to take that severity into account. So we're seeing that we're not going to invest then in things that have a low severity crash and a low likelihood, which are things that people sometimes just like to invest in, if that makes sense. Anyway, I think it's just it's a risk assessment methodology, and there's no particular score you have to achieve at this stage. Some jurisdictions keep looking and wanting to do this, but it's just to help you prioritize investment, really. That's the key. Okay. Anything for me to deal with, Max, or we were good to keep going?
Good to go, Ken.
Okay. So let's just look at this sort of example, and it's not an in-depth safe system assessment. We want to show you a little bit of sort of how things look, and I will jump out at some point and show you a real, full one for a decent sized project. But here you can see, and I don't expect you to read the words here, so don't worry about that. Here you can see the existing conditions. You can see there, this is existing conditions. And you can see exposure and a few words and then a score. A few words and a score. It's not a huge amount of words because it's just saying that, the Austroads trigger is this and this is what the score is. Then you can see the likelihood. You can see factors that increase the likelihood and dot points of things that the assessment team has seen. Oh, that makes us want to put the score higher. But these things make us want to put the score down. And then a score. And okay, they've landed on a 2.5, so that might have been debate amongst the team. It's a 2, it's a 3, it's a 2, it's a 3, it's a 2, it's a 3. They landed on a 2.5. Or maybe they had some more accurate reasons why they went to a 2.5. And it's the same for severity. Increases the severity, decreases the severity, dot points, and a score. And then the total score. Total score, final score. And they've got their baseline. They've got their existing condition score and matrix. So this one, could be this scenario. Here we've got an intersection. It's got a hold line there. It's got some power poles, bit of footpath. And so, you're assessing this. Okay, it's got lighting. You did your own intersection assessment and you categorize things into likelihood, severity, exposure. Well, you did factors that influence exposure, but exposure is really, the numbers in this. You're looking there at structures around there, land use, what's going on, trees, how close are hazards to the edge line, what's the sealed shoulder like, what's the drop off, what's the surface looking like, what do we think the skid resistance would be there. They're all factoring into play. What's the speed? How many vulnerable road users? Where are pedestrians crossing? Why, what are their desire lines? What are the cyclist numbers? And then they say to you, well, we're going to upgrade that intersection and we're thinking about a few things. We're thinking about a roundabout as one option. Single lane roundabout. We're thinking about a signalized modified T. So that's where the T comes in on the curve, as you can see there. Or we're thinking about a conventional T intersection with slip lanes and straightening things out. You go, okay, that's good. So we've got our existing conditions. We did that. It was what's currently there. We didn't need to know what the designs were going to be. We did that. Let's copy that now and let's paste that. Look at the roundabout design and start crossing out things that are removed, factors that are removed when the roundabout is built, and add in new factors that have appeared because a roundabout is now there. And they could be good things or bad things, right? And so you're starting to go through and crossing out bits here and adding new things, crossing out bits, adding new things, all off your baseline existing conditions. Cross out this bit, add some more here. You're not changing any of the volumes, you see, unless there's something that tells you to change the volumes. But we're still expecting the same number of vehicles going through there. Unless some traffic modeling reports shown you that, oh, by building that roundabout, all of a sudden a massive increase from one, from somewhere are going to start using that intersection. But without any of that information, everything stays the same. And then you're changing the severity. You might be just adding a word in here or there, or the speeds are changing, or whatever it is. And then you do that for each of the designs you're provided. So you grab the existing conditions matrix and you modify it again. And then the next design, you grab the existing conditions matrix and you modify it again. And then you're able to produce some overarching scores. And I like putting little symbols just so it's easy for people to see. And you can see there that the existing conditions gets a score of 118.5. These are your total scores. Design option 2, the roundabout, well, it's got the best alignment with safe system principles at 90, modified T to 99, 105 for the P intersection. What that tells me is that any of the options they are putting forward improves alignment with safe system principles. The best from the designs that they have provided is the roundabout for alignment with safe system principles. You can show them that in a graph or whatever form you want. But there's still 90 there. And what it also says to me is, okay, they're going for a roundabout. A roundabout's the best aligned there, but a bit worried about cyclists there. And, we're not doing much for motorcyclists. And, it's still got some high scores for pedestrians. Let's not stop thinking about these others. So what you do then is say, hey, for your roundabout design, here are some ideas how you can get better scores. For your signalized intersection modified T, here's some ideas how you can get better scores. And for your conventional T, here's some ideas on how you could get better scores. So this is a really important thing to get your head around, is the recommendation section of a safe system assessment is about altering their design. Now, we do see people get confused in that because they've sort of stopped it. Oh, my job was just to score. And then they get this recommendation consideration section and they're like putting in their things that were in the design that made them want to change their score. That's been covered in the matrix. You're now saying, how do we make things better aligned with safe system principles? What ideas have you got? And for each of those ideas that you come up with, you categorize them. And you're going to categorize those ideas into primary or supporting. And so a primary treatment, road planning, design, management considerations that virtually eliminate the potential for fatal or serious injuries occurring in association with the foreseeable crash type. The supporting treatment is road planning, design, and management considerations that improve the overall level of safety associated with foreseeable crash types, but are not expected to virtually eliminate the potential for fatal or serious injury. And it's also got this little sort of clause that it doesn't alter the ability to implement a primary treatment in the future, but that's not used very often. Just for terminology reference, the non-safe system is anything that is going to actually make things worse. We're going to see worse road safety outcomes or reduces the ability for us to get that primary treatment in the future. But the thing here is, for primary, you've got to take human failure into account. So you're really having to do things to either physically eliminate, like a barrier system that completely separates these road users or something like that, or you're going to have to get speeds and angles down to tolerable levels for the crashes. If you're not addressing that severity of crash or eliminating exposure, it's really not going to be a primary treatment. So no matter how much signs and lines you throw it at an area, you're not going to be able to call it a primary treatment. Signs, lines, lighting, opening up sight lines is another classic. Like, people will say there's a sight line deficiency because of parked cars at the intersection. Remove the parked car, they want to call that a primary treatment because they've removed the sight line impediment. But we're talking about the crash at the intersection is the issue. You remove the parked car, you've lessened the chance that somebody makes that bad call and goes into the intersection. But when it happens, it's going to be high speed, bad angle. We haven't eliminated death or serious injury. We've reduced the likelihood of it by a bit. So removing that parked car, that sight line impediment, that is a supporting treatment. Yeah. So what you're going to do is, look at the designs. You're going to score the matrix, the existing conditions, look at the designs, come up with scores for the matrix, come up with ways that they can make the scores lower for each of those designs. And each time you suggest something, you categorize it into primary or supporting. There's also these prompt questions around the other elements or other pillars of the SAFE system. Now, this can be done before you do the matrix, after you do the matrix. I often like to do this fairly early on with the project team in a workshop or something like that, or send it to them early on and see if they've got any ideas, because occasionally some of these influence your scoring. But they're straight out of the Off-Road Safe System Assessment Framework again. You are not limited to these questions. You can ask other questions if you think they're relevant things, but I'll just run through them very, very briefly. So you would ask these questions around road users and say, are road users likely to be alert and compliant, and are there factors that might influence this? What are the expected compliance enforcement levels? So drugs, alcohol, speed, road rules, all that sort of stuff. What is the likelihood of driver fatigue in the area? Is it between on a very long stretch in remote Queensland, or are we in an urban environment with lots going on and lots of stimulation to a driver? Can enforcement activities be conducted safely? Are there special road users? Is it an entertainment precinct? Elderly, children, on-road activities, motorcycle route? Are there distraction by environmental factors? Big advertising signs or flashing LED things. And is there high levels of risk-taking behavior? Now, you're not quantifying any of these. You're just making commentary, dot points, ideas, thoughts, things you've noticed, talking to the project team, or, if you've been given permission, talking to the highway patrol, the police of the area. Can you do enforcement? They build this, will you be able to still do that enforcement? Those sorts of questions. There's been some pretty exciting things come out of those questions, somebody just asking those. Remember, one stands out in my mind was a big $103 million duplication of a road, and going through these questions, and that one of, can enforcement be conducted safely? And the client sort of gave permission to have some discussions with the local highway patrol, and we, back when you were allowed to go into these areas without COVID restriction. I haven't been into a highway patrol office for a few years, but you roll out the roll plot of the proposed upgrades, and that's what's been planned. We'll be able to conduct enforcement safely, and we have a bit of a chat about it. What do they need? Where would they do it? Okay, you're putting continuous barrier systems there. We're not going to put the booze bus, or it's going to be really awkward. And yeah, we're not. No. And then they say, well, what about this area? Could something be done there as an old stack site? And okay, I'll take that back. There might be an opportunity there, and some more work. It was a suggested look into that as an area where the booze bus, you might be able to make some modifications, and the booze bus might be able to go there. And then, yeah, sure enough, the design was sort of updated, and this stack site, just some configurations of it, and is able to be used as a dedicated enforcement facility. And they even built a little sort of number plate recognition bay further up the road, so they could get the number plate information and then flag down, whoever they decided who had, outstanding warrants or issues or not registered vehicle and those sorts of things. So, I don't think it cost any extra in the scheme of the mass project, but a wonderful sort of holistic safe system outcome there. And so, that's just one example. I just randomly thought of that as I was talking about that question of, can enforcement be conducted safely? But somebody just going through the process of asking that question within the project is good. Sometimes that's picked up within the project team or different workshops, different safety and design workshops, or these sort of things. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes with these questions in your project, you're just like, I don't know, I don't know, it doesn't make sense in this road environment or context, but they're there anyway. So the vehicles, what is the level of alignment with the ideals of safer vehicles? That's a sort of big picture. That's usually when you're doing a mine site or a remote community or a whole area or some private road area where you're talking about their fleet and, what they pick. So again, for a urban roundabout upgrade or something like that, it's going not applicable. I don't know, that doesn't make too much sense. Are there factors that might attract a large number of unsafe vehicles? Percentage of heavy vehicles too high for the proposed road design? Recreational motorcyclists? Are there resources to detect non-roadworthy, overloaded, unregistered vehicles and remove them from the network? Can enforcement activities be undertaken safely? Again, there. And has vehicle breakdown been catered for? Post-crash care, are there issues that may influence safe and efficient post-crash care in the event of a severe injury? So congestion, access, stopping, space. That's usually comes up in motorway assessments and the like. But it's always a good one to think about in whatever's happening. Do emergency and medical services operate as efficiently and rapidly as possible, or operate as efficiently as possible? So that's, again, one where you might be in a remote area and it's just the time taken, and are there wider things that can be done to improve that? Doing one in New Zealand at one point, and it was in the Coromandel area, and we're discussing the time taken for injured motorcyclists to be to have medical treatment, and it was pretty significant, and there was challenges with the helicopter finding appropriate spaces to land and to extract. And so, the idea of helicopter landing pads was presented due to this question, and I think they built some of those in the end. Probably some of our New Zealanders might be able to. But that's very different thinking, isn't it? To just the when you're looking at the Coromandel, which is a popular motorcycle area in New Zealand. Of course, we're looking at the underarm protection, the signage, the sealed shoulders, the geometry of the road, the consistency of the route from all these perspectives, the surface conditions and those sort of things. That's all that. But can we think wider? Can we think about the riders themselves, the vehicles, post-crash care? Are other road users and emergency response teams protected during a crash event? Are drivers provided correct information to address travel speeds on the approach to an incident? Is there reliable information via radio or VMS? Is there provision for safety system based on modern information and communication technology, cooperative, intelligent transport systems? That's a bit of a vehicle of the future question down there. And, you know, do you have comms to the vehicle and those sorts of things? So again, most of the time on those, you're sort of scratching your head. But most of the things you say system assessment, maybe saying nothing applicable in this project, but you know, if you're doing a new tunnel or something like that, you might be thinking in this space. And what are those? What's that holistic system and comms availability? Max, any questions or comments there?
All good, thank you, Ken.
Well, we're getting close to the point where we will be getting people to, or explaining what they're going to have to do to produce for their assignment. I'm going to just show this. Well, this is a safe system assessment report, or an example of one, and I'll show you an actual completed one in a second. And I'll tell you now that there are templates available. So you can take them, put your own branding on them, and off you go. The key, though, is consistency, that we want everybody to be doing the same reporting, so it's a consistent thing that comes out. And so it's saying there, what is the type of assessment, a full or a rapid? And I will explain the difference to that in the next module. Those qualitative questions I just ran you through, they don't appear in a rapid in a rapid safe system assessment. Is one of the differences. The members of the assessment team, the meetings and inspections, description of the process, and that's always important because it is a very new process still, and so explaining it is important for people who pick it up and don't know what they're looking at. Project background, context of the project, and then your matrix and matrices for every design that you get. So your existing conditions and then all of the designs, commentary on the other safe system components, elements, pillars, and suggested treatments that would improve alignment with safe system principles, categorized into supporting or primary or other, supporting or primary. So before we start explaining the assignment, I thought I would just show a live existing safe system assessment, a real one. That's all right.
Good idea.
And Max, I picked one you might recognize. Yes. Randomly out of our big files of safe system assessments. I picked one Max had led and done with the team. So we'll see how we went. So you can see here just the usual information. An executive summary is always a good thing, and some information there. But you can immediately see there, we've got the scores, and we can see how they align with safe system, the overarching scores. So that's nice to see straight off the bat. And there's our output graph, and I was expecting and hoping to see that. Existing conditions. Okay, so design option 2 is making things worse in runoff road. I can tell that already without even knowing much else. So we're getting, some improvements in some areas. Motorcyclists, pretty bad, staying bad in all options, and that's not uncommon to see. Motorcyclists, very challenging road user. Okay, a little bit about some of the options there, but this is good. This is what I also want to see. Something to show the scope of work. This looks quite complex with quite a few options going on there. It's interesting, but you can see there a nice color coding, so it's kind of easy for you to see. But The blue, whatever the blue option was, is going to make things worse in terms of safe system alignment. The others are all going to make it better, and it looks like the yellow there. So design option 4 is our preference without any of the taking on any of the recommended changes. Some more explanation there. So let's keep going down. Might zip through here a little quicker. Explanation of the process, which is good. There's the team, the Safe System Assessment team. That's good. Went out there on site. Now there's no, so this is interesting. Max and team went out there at night. They're not necessarily a requirement. It's left to the discretion of the assessment team as to whether they think that'd be beneficial or not. You decided for that one to go out at night?
Yes, that's right. Just to make sure that we've kind of looked at the sites in all conditions there, Ken.
Yep, no, that's good, comprehensive. It's a big one. It looks like a lot of work, a lot of options, so it's maybe worth it. So a bit of the background of the project, existing conditions explanation there. So there's a fair bit of stuff there. Some description of the project options. So that's good. Good to make sure. The other reason this is also good to do, so dot pointing out exactly what there was, is if there's alterations to the design in the future and they're still using an old safe system assessment score to justify it, you know, well, that was the scope that was assessed, not whatever you're looking at now. Here are the Austroads Safe System Assessment Framework prompts. You remember those questions you asked at the start? What's the reason for the project? Any commitments, speeds, all of that stuff? There's the scoring sheet straight out of Austroads. That's Austroads green color. Exactly what I was showing you and talking you through, just in the slightly different look. But here we are. Now we're into the matrices. And you can see there, existing conditions or the do nothing scenario. And you can see there that there's pretty good justification, isn't it? It's not just just chuck a 3 in there or 2 in there, but it's quite well documented out, lots of justification, and the scores are put in there. And then very well presented here, Max, nicely. So this one's in blue, so you can see that that's, you know, different one, and red for things that have been added, crosses out for things that have been removed by implementing this option, nicely changing the color of scores that have changed, okay, as a result of the work, and scores that have changed. So head-on risk hasn't changed, but the run-off road has, and the other and the like. And then we've got the next option and option. So you can see there's a fair bit to do. It's really delving into it. And then you get your summary at the end there, which is nice. And some commentary around a few things. But let's jump down to these are now those qualitative questions, high-level commentary, which is a fair point, and just any ideas or things that popped in about the road user, those qualitative questions, I'll answer. But this is the one I wanted to get to, the recommendations now, primary treatments or supporting treatments. And you can see here, primary treatments. Consider installing a roundabout at Old Manawatha Road and Overpass Link Road, applicable to design option 5 and 4. Oh, and it looks like the project teams are already responded to that. Now, that blue text, that is not what you do as an assessor. That's when you give it to your client and they can, you know, respond and write back whatever they want and, you know, may provide it back to you. It's very nice that they have. So primary treatments, dotted out, primary. And then supporting treatments. Consider ensuring that all signalized intersections are fully controlled at all times. No red arrow drop-offs. And that's a very good supporting treatment, and it is supporting. We know the addition of a fully controlled right turn, a red arrow, is very effective in reducing the likelihood of right turn against crashes. It does not eliminate them. It's not addressing the exposure to crashes, but it's a good treatment, but it's definitely supporting. Signal tweaks are always going to be supporting, unless maybe you're doing things to slow vehicles through the intersection. So you can see there lots of recommendations, bit of a conclusion, some photos from the site, which is good. Now, somebody mentioned, oh, do you ever use crash history? Crash history, you can put in there to help, because you might be interested in it, in gathering context and understanding and what your road users are there. The reason I mentioned you don't use crash history to determine your scoring of an exposure or a likelihood or a severity, but it could help you in gathering understanding about the site and the issues. A little bit of a look at what the land use is, and that's it. But you can see it's not a, it's not a thing you do in one night, is it? It's a pretty comprehensive review. And I dare say that that's kind of warranted, that a team goes through that project, which was probably going to cost, $50-70 million or $100 million or something, and does that level of thinking about all the safety elements and the like. I mean, if we're going to spend that much money, let's get the best bang for our buck out of safe system alignment, improving facilities, and thinking about pedestrians and cyclists and motorcyclists, as well as all the vehicles. And it's just a good independent review and assessment process. So good one, Max. That's was a good one to pick. Looked pretty good.
Thanks, Ken. Lots of good memories. I remember the site inspection well, actually, because I got to try a new restaurant in Albury for dinner, one that was on my list. So it was a memorable occasion.
Living the dream. Well, let's give this group some memorable occasions of getting out on site and having a look and doing some safe system assessing. So I'm going to share a couple more slides, and then Max, I'll get you to run through Moodle what to do. I just want to show a couple more things, and so let's have a look at the assignment. Max is going to take you through this. We're giving you a template. It's the Victorian government template, and exactly as it is, and you'll be filling out the highlighted areas. And we've tried to, streamline it so you're not wasting too much time with anything apart from proving to us you have the competency and understanding of how to do the basics of a safe system assessment. But we are going to ask you to go to site. Now, the sites have all been reviewed and risk assessed to the degree of somebody going to these sites, and they can all be done extremely safely. Okay, we're not sending anybody out to a motorway or anything like that. They're all very, you can do them very safely, but we do need you to ensure that you're going to be safe out there. We want you to wear a high-vis vest, and people have been in contact with you to make sure you've got one of those. So we want you to wear your high-vis vest when you're out there. We want you to stay off the road. We don't need you standing out there. We don't need you putting your head down looking at the crossfall of the road, or we don't need you measuring lane widths and those sorts of things. You're out there to gather an understanding of how it all functions, what road users are present, looking just at the general characteristics of the road and the like. We don't need those precise measurements. Don't be a hazard yourself. So if you don't make people walk onto the road around you or the like, and if you do happen to be there with others, certainly that can be an issue. And don't park safely so you're not in danger. So park on a side road or a quieter area, and also think about not being a hazard of where you park. So you're not pushing cyclists into through lanes, or you're not making pedestrians have to go somewhere. So think about just parking safely. And we've documented all this in a safe work method statement, plus some very common sense things like don't go out there intoxicated, if you're traveling a long distance, take a break. But if you're having to travel a long distance, get in contact with us, because we'll give you a site closer to you. We don't want to make this anything extra as a burden on you. It should be very close to your house or your workplace or whatever the address is you gave us. You should be able to get out there quite very safely, as long as you are just conscious of that. Now, I know you're all sort of in the game, in the industry, and you do site visits, and so you should be able to do this extremely safely. But we will ask you to read that safe work method statement and just confirm that you will be sensible out there. But over to you, Max, to take everybody through what's in Moodle, how they get their site and their design, and I might bring up just something else after you're finished having that chat.
No problem. So here we've got Moodle for Module 4, which we're running at the moment. There is a quiz at the end of today, so feel free to complete that at the end of today's session. What Ken was just discussing then is Module 5 and completing the safe work method statement. So the actual SWIMS, as it's referred to, is within this folder itself. So if you click on that, we ask that all participants read through the risk items associated with conducting the site visit, acknowledging all the mitigation measures in place, and ensuring that you feel comfortable prior to actually going out on site, that all that information makes sense. We also have the, we need to get everyone to actually agree to that safe work method statement, which is in the form of a quiz. It's just one question. And it's basically saying I will abide to all those risk mitigation measures and ensure that I'm following all procedures in line with the SWIMS, just to give us a sense of confidence that you've actually read the SWIMS and you feel comfortable going out there on site. You're going to wear your high vis, you're not going to be a hazard, etc. It's all very straightforward things, but it's just a way to actually document that. So please make sure that that has been completed prior to conducting your site visit. If we click on this one here, Module 5, complete your safe system assessment, you'll see that there is 2 documents in here at the moment: the assignment SSA templates and the graph generator. I'm going to open the Word document up first, which will look like this. And as Ken mentioned, this is the Vic Roads Safe System Assessment template. So this is downloaded straight from the Vic Roads website, and it's just been, it's just alterations, formatting alterations that we've provided. So it makes it clearer exactly which sections you need to fill out. So we've said complete only the highlighted sections, and we've crossed out all the information that you do not need to fill in, just to make it very, very clear which sections are applicable to the assignment. So I'll just scroll through. You can see executive summary is not something you need to worry about. Don't need to touch the table of contents. The only thing that we require within the assessment details is you need to fill in who the assessment team is, and it will just be an individual there. So just one name. So just fill in your name in that section there. So just as a reminder, anytime you see the highlighted sections, that's stuff that you need to fill in. All those prompts that Ken touched on in today's session, we won't get you to fill in for this assignment, just because you won't know the background of the project. It is purely a hypothetical situation. So there's no real, you won't have the information to fill that in anyway. So we've crossed all that out. We do ask you to fill in, well, what is the design proposing? So is it changing a signalized intersection to a roundabout? So we'll just ask you to provide a description of what that proposed design entails. And also importantly, include the drawing number and issue numbers. So if you can just include, and that's good practice going forward, just include the exact designs that you have reviewed. And the reason for that, as Ken mentioned, is in case later on the design changes and it looks like your assessment does not adequately mention the risks associated with an updated design. Well, you've said clearly in the safe system assessment, this is the design that we reviewed, this is the issue number, and it's all just spelled out nice and clear. So that's a very good reason for doing that. We'll get you to fill all this assessment summary in once you've actually completed the matrices. So this is kind of done at a later stage. So I'm just going to skip over this as well, and including that Excel document or that graph there. I'll bring that up later on. But here is the matrix that we have been discussing in detail today. Hopefully it all looks familiar. You'll see that all of this needs to be filled in. So you'll first need to do an existing conditions assessment. So that is this first matrix. You'll need to pop in factors that increase and decrease the likelihood and increase and decrease the severity. Just spell it out as clearly as possible. We will be reviewing each of those items and making sure that they're in the correct kind of category. Appreciate that, you could potentially, dot point hundreds of different items there. So it's up to you as Safe System assessors to kind of pick ones that are most critical within the design. And if you can't think of any at all, you can use NA. There's nothing within this environment that decreases the severity of a runoff road crash, for instance. You can say there's nothing there at all. So don't feel compelled that you have to have lists and lists of dot points. We will be asking you to assign scores for each of these crash types and crash exposure, likelihood and severity, so crash factors. And you'll ask you to produce a product, so a multiplication of those scores. To make things easier, I'll open up the second document, which was in Moodle, which is an Excel document. And this will help you to provide that calculation and also give you the graph output so you don't have to do anything yourself. So it does all the multiplication for you. So as an example, I'll say the street that you're looking at is called Safety Street. And you can see there in the graph that just populated automatically. You've gone through the existing conditions matrix and you've assigned all these scores. I'll just do the first one, which is runoff road. We'll say we've assigned a score of 4 for exposure. Likelihood was 2, severity was also 4. Spits out a total of 32 automatically, and the graph automatically just updates to show that. You do the same for the matrix for your design option 2, and we'll say the exposure stays the same. Likelihood, it's less likely, it's now 1, but the severity stays the same. So you should see a reduction there, and yes, we get a score of 16 now, which is shown on the graph as well. We've also included within this kind of template the option, if you want to use this for future projects, we just like to share our resources. So if you happen to have 2 design options, we've got this spreadsheet here as well, which can be used for 2 design options, and also 3 design options as well. So if you're looking at multiple different designs all within the same Safe System assessment, you can use this as a resource there, and it just produces the graph nice and tidily and just gives you that output. So feel free to use that if that's handy in future projects. I'll jump back into the assignment template here. Once you've completed your existing conditions matrix, we'll get you to copy and paste that entire matrix, because as Ken showed you, when you're reviewing the design option, what we'll get you to do is cross out all the factors that are no longer applicable to the design and add in another color. We use red typically to show things that have changed from the existing conditions to the design. So you will have to, once you've filled in your existing conditions matrix, you copy and paste that, and then you apply formatting to then assess the design option. And hopefully you'll see changes in the scoring between the existing conditions and the design option. Finally, at the end, we have this section which we are asking for recommendations or any primary or supporting treatments. You don't need to fill in any of the project response. We're just asking for anything that could be improved within the design, and that would be considered a primary treatment. So something that would virtually eliminate the chance of a fatal or serious injury crash. And you can populate them in this section here, and also some supporting treatments as well. So this is the part where you're saying, okay, here's something for the project team to consider. These are some primary treatments that we would consider the best in terms of safe system principles. And here's some supporting treatments as well that you could consider that will improve the road safety performance. Don't need to worry about the road conclusion or any appendices. Oh, actually, we do have, if you could just add a photo of you out on site just to prove that you did actually go out there. We like to see participants out there in the high vis, so grab a selfie and just to make sure that we can see that you went out there and you were nice and safe. So please add that in the appendix as well. And I will just scroll back to that section here. Just populate the table which says your score that you got for your existing conditions as well as your design option, and replace this graph with what you have produced in the Excel document. And Ken, I note that we typically upload the designs in this section here, don't we, for each of the participants, and it doesn't look like they're there just yet. Is that just my computer, maybe, or perhaps they're just getting uploaded in the background today?
Yeah, no, they should be there. Let me have a look on mine. We'll have them in there shortly if
they might just be getting uploaded as we're running this webinar, so feel free to check later on today. And what will happen is you'll see a whole list of different sites, and there'll be names attached to each of the PDFs. So you just find your name and then you click on it and it'll be a PDF. I might just grab a previous course, Ken, just so I can show what that actually looks like.
Yeah,
for participants. So this is what it will look like probably later on today, once we've finalized all that uploading.
I've got them in mind, Max.
Oh, really? Oh, just my computer then. Sorry, guys. Do you want to share the screen? You want to take it over? Yep. I'm behind the times.
I'm pretty sure. Oh, no, sorry. I've gone to the wrong one as well.
Yeah. That's
anyway,
okay. But it's still illustrative.
Yeah. So you'll see, and you'll be able to find your name in brackets at the end of one, and then you'll click on it and it'll download, and you'll be able to open it up, and there you go. There's the design, and down here you can see some traffic volumes, pedestrians, cyclists and motorcyclists. Now, use what is given to you there. Sometimes you might go, that doesn't look right, but it's been sort of put there so we know what you've assessed it under, and we could score you accordingly. So just use what is there. Now, let's just go back. Sorry. If for some reason a couple of you have the same site and you know the other person, and you want to go out as a team and do this, we're okay with that. You definitely don't have to, but you're okay with that. But you would have to submit your own reports. You could be sharing information, obviously, but you'd certainly have to say that you did the assessment with this person. That was your assessment team. So in your report. So if hypothetically 2 reports came in and we didn't know that it was a team, there'd be some questioning about how they're so similar and the like. But if it says, this was a team, and then we go, okay, that's fine. But most of you will have your own site. Sorry, Max, I picked the wrong one.
Okay. I'll check with our training team to make sure that's all uploaded for close of business today. But probably check again this afternoon, and you should see your site up there and ready. For the assignment, are we given the design to score? Yes, your design will be uploaded in that space there where you'll be able to download that, and you can reference that to, that's what you'll have to use as your design to score.
So a couple of things. So the design, like the one I showed, you may get a design that is a real design that's out there in the public realm, or you might get something that our design team fabricated, made up for you. But regardless, if the community come out to ask what's going on, or what are you planning here, or the like, which many of you know happens quite often when you put on your high-vis vest and you stand in the corner. The residents come out to ask, or somebody walking past, or please just say you're on a train. It's just a training exercise, just looking at the intersection. Don't need to show them, don't need to cause any undue concern. Now, Max and I are available to help you as you need. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by this idea, you once you've downloaded your design and downloaded the template and the graph generator, and you're looking at all, you don't understand what you're meant to do or anything like that, well, get in contact with us. Shoot an email to Max or myself. Say, I'd like to have a chat about it. We can organize a short one-on-one Zoom with you. Or after you've started and you've got some questions, you could get in contact with us. Or you can bring those questions along to the next session, which is in a week's time. And we can have that discussion and explain it so the rest of the group gets some advantage in hearing the answer to that question. Because if you're asking the question, odds on somebody else has probably got that question, or maybe they just didn't encounter that in their particular design. So we really encourage you to utilize us with the virtual course. It can be a little harder, when we run this in person, we can walk around to everybody, ask how they're going and the like. This one, we more have to trust that if you're struggling, you'll get in contact with us. When's it due, Max?
We've got a 2-week period here. So Thursday, the 2nd of December is the due date.
That's good. There's an example safe system assessment in Moodle on your memory stick as well, completed. So you've got a template, you've got the example, you've got the guidelines, you've got all the notes, you've got the recordings from the sessions. You've got the graph generator tool to make your life easy there. It's highlighted what you need to do. You'll have a design. And the last thing I wanted to do, Max, if we've got 3 minutes or so, I have like my top 10 things I take marks off people for. They're just things over the many years I've been running this course. They're the ones that people continually make mistakes. We've tried to update the content to make it clearer, but I might as well let people know these so they can be aware. So the first one is just that the matrix is just light on for detail. So Max did mention there you can put a none, but I wouldn't want to be seeing that very often. I like to see enough detail that we can be confident that you had a real analysis of that cell of the matrix and arrived at that score with good thought about the whole entity, rather than just a couple of words and a number. So light on for detail was one. The matrix of the design doesn't highlight the changes. So existing conditions, copy it, paste it, and then you've got to use a different color and cross things out. If you just sort of write a new matrix, very hard to see what's changing. We want to see what's changing. A few things in the categorization of exposure, likelihood, and severity. So putting factors into the incorrect spots. You've had quite a bit of practice of that now, so I'm hoping you're going to be doing pretty well there. One that's just a little one, and it's kind of a minor one, but if I see anybody put a none in, like there is nothing that would bring this score down, I would expect to see the score to be a 4. So if you're going to put a none, you're going to have to max out the scoring there. Another one is that people come up with ideas and alterations, but they're very, they're almost all sort of supporting. We're not pushing to get that safe system outcome, to bring energies within tolerable levels. And when I look at some of the recommendations, they're very much what I would expect to see out of road safety audit reports. A bit of a tweak of line marking, a bit of tweak of signs, opening up sight lines. I still expect to see all of those in supporting treatments, but I'd like to see some bigger pictures, some pushing the safe system philosophy forward, raising intersections, raising crossing points, really getting that speed management, things within energy tolerable levels. Remember that they may not take on all your recommendations, but we should be putting them out there, pushing forward. And the final one, which is a big one here, that some people really don't, in that recommendation section, they're not making recommendations on the design. You need to recommend alterations to the design. Okay, so look at the design, say, well, I should put a crossing point here, and they should raise this bit. And okay, there's nothing here about fixing up that signage that I saw out on site, so that should be fixed up. And they're your recommendations. So there are a few that commonly come up. Anything else, Max?
I think we're all good. We can let participants get stuck into the quiz, Ken.
So there's a quiz at the end of today's, is there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is it just the Wally question, or are there actual questions? I think it might be just the Wally question, maybe. So, oh no.
Oh, there's a few questions in there.
Actual questions. All right. All right. Well, we'll give you time to do that, and we will upload the personalized designs. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you in a week's time, but please keep in contact if you've got any questions on your assignment. There's a bit to do there, but we're hoping it's sort of within maybe a couple of hours worth of work to be able to wrap that up somewhere within that, hopefully. So yeah, we wouldn't want you to be spending 2 days on this. You can easily get very, very good marks within those reasonable timeframes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye.